A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. Las Vegas, anybody? Is there really a despair in Vegas? An unconscious despair in Vegas? I think so. I love Vegas. I love Vegas. But just looking at it, there is no play in them, for this comes after work. But it is a characteristic of wisdom to not do desperate things. I'm sorry, not to do desperate things. Same thing. It's a great paragraph, a great line. I'm going to leave it for you. But it sure doesn't paint a nice picture of most people in life, right? It is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. So wisdom, okay, if we're going to go back, wisdom would not inherit the farm. That's what Thoreau's saying. Wisdom would not plow himself into compost. Wisdom would not keep going into that job day after day. Wisdom would not be a stony rock, hardening his heart and just doing what he doesn't want to do. And I'm not talking about, I don't want to wash the dishes. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I do not want to do this anymore. When you get to that point of just deep, significant, it's like, I can't do this. You get to a place of desperation. Most people, according to Walden Pond, just push through that and continue on doing it. They live a quiet desperation. They've resigned themselves. You see? Wisdom does not do that. Wisdom would get up and go. Wisdom would find another way. Wisdom would start doing something about their situation to pull themselves up out of this place they don't want to be in. And that's and when you ask the question, how do you do that? Walden Pond is here to answer that question. That's what Walden Pond is all about. One of the main things is you start going back to yourself. And let's where's that line? Better if they had been born in the open pasture and suckled by a wolf, that they might have seen with clearer eyes what field they were called to labor in. So this is also an interesting line. It's like, there's a calling inside of each one of us, according to Thoreau, and I personally agree with that as well, that there's a calling inside of each one of us, that none of us are just useless things in an economy. We all have value and wealth mechanisms built into us. Areas of expertise, areas of passion and interest, and those can be capitalized on, literally. And it's finding that field that we're called to labor in. We're not built to be, machines doing an assembly line job. That's what Thoreau's talking about. Right here, he says it. His labor would be depreciated in the market. He has no time to be anything but a machine. One more thing in an assembly line. Or even a businessman who just as a machine just keeps doing whatever his customers want to do. He has no soul. He has no spine. He's just a dude that's just following along. It's like, what about him? Where is he in that? Okay? These are controversial revolutionary statements, but they're very powerful. And I don't know, if you've ever had the feeling of that quiet desperation, you know what I'm talking about. I know that because I've had that feeling, And it's a powerful thing, and it's amazing to be able to pull yourself up out of it. And that's why I love Walden Pond. It's so inspirational. I actually believe that Walden Pond is one of the most dangerous books that can be read. And that's why I'm going for it, because I love things like that. It's very revolutionary. It's very empowering for individuals. And that's a scary thing in a society for many people in powerful places. And all the more reason for me to start sharing it with you. So, let's get in here. There are some good things in here. And I just want to see, I don't know how long we've been going here, but that's all right. When we consider what, to use the words of the Catechism, is the chief end of man, and what are the true necessaries and means of life, it appears as if men had deliberately chosen the common mode of living because they preferred it to any other. Okay, now we're seeing here, once again, we're right back to those tones, of those classic Thoreauian tones. He's turning things on the head. When we consider, to use the words of the Catechism, hang on one second, I gotta pause this. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to get this for you. So, in case you don't know, the Catechism, so when we consider what, to use the words of the Catechism, is the chief end of man. So a catechism, you can look it up, it's just, it's like a way of indoctrinating people. It's like you give these kind of questions, and then you give an answer and you just tell people what the answer is, and they're supposed to just bring it back to you. It's a classic Christian thing. It's actually used in corporations and stuff as well. So when we consider what, to use the words of the Catechism, is the chief end of man, and what are the true necessaries and means of life. So here's an example from Wikipedia. Here's what Thoreau is referring to. It's a modern version of the famous Westminster Shorter Catechism. Let me just kind of roll this over for you. In 1647, what is the chief end of man? And that's right out of Thoreau. He quoted that. To glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's the answer that you're supposed to give. Okay? What rule hath God given to direct us how we may glorify and enjoy him? The word of God as heard by all people directly. Cool. Sounds good. So that's what he's referring to there, just so you know. All right, now let's go back. So it's to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Now that is an interesting statement, when you start looking at what Walden Pond is. I'm here to tell you that I think Walden Pond is an attempt at glorifying God and enjoying him forever. And when you hear Thoreau talk about Walden Pond, I know some places that I can actually show you that. But I don't want to go there right now. I'd have to look for it. But there's a point. Oh, maybe I will. Okay, let me pause the video. Okay, so yeah, we kind of got a little bit distracted, but yeah, I'm gonna show you this quote, so I want to prove to you, give you some proof here. Hold on, let me just pull up here that catechism quote again. What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy him forever. So I'm going to show you that I think that Walden Pond is an example that Thoreau's doing that. So I'm going to move over to a different chapter. We're in the chapter Solitude right now, and this is towards the end. I think it's about, third paragraph from the end. I'm going to read this for you, and we can break it down for you. We're going a little bit out of order, but it's all in line. I have occasional visits in the long winter evenings, when the snow falls fast and the wind howls in the wood, from an old settler and original proprietor, who is reported to have dug Walden Pond, and stoned it, and fringed it with pine woods, who tells me stories of old time and of new eternity. And between us we manage to pass a cheerful evening with social mirth and pleasant views of things, even without apples or cider. A most wise and humorous friend, whom I love much, who keeps himself more secret than ever did Gough or Whaley. And though he is thought to be dead, none can show where he is buried. An elderly dame, too, dwells in my neighborhood, invisible to most persons, in whose odorous herb garden I love to stroll sometimes, gathering simples and listening to her fables, for she has a genius of unequaled fertility, and her memory runs back farther than mythology, and she can tell me the original of every fable, and on what fact everyone is founded. For the incidents occurred when she was young, a ruddy and lusty old dame who delights in all weathers and seasons, and is likely to outlive all her children yet. So, I don't know if you caught it, but he's talking about God and Mother Earth. Let's just kind of go through it together, and you can see how he finds God and Mother Earth, he finds God in his solitude. He finds Mother Earth with nature and being on his own in a place that he resonates with. Maybe yours isn't nature. Maybe yours is just being home alone, I don't know. If you're hearing noise in the background, it's my wife just doing stuff, so apologize for that, but it's all right. Regardless, whatever your place is, that's what this is about. So it's not necessarily to say we're all to live Walden's life, but it is to say that you live in that sense, whatever that works for you, and just take a look, see if that will be, if you'll have interesting experiences as well. It's interesting how he's using this. He's being very quiet and humorous in the way he's talking about this, because he doesn't just come out right out and say, "Oh yeah, I'd have these great moments with God. They were just profound." Like he could make this sound like he's a preacher up in a podium, up in a church, but he's not. He's not doing that. He's hiding it and couching it and making it sound like he's talking to some person. And he's totally hiding the whole thing. He's being kind of tricky. I have occasional visits, so not all the time, just occasional. It comes when he comes, right? We can't control God. In the long winter evenings, notice the long winter when it's darkest and coldest and just most difficult times. When the snow falls fast and the wind howls in the wood. So it's kind of crazy too. It sounds like it's environmentally, it's like, the world around him's pretty wild. From an old settler, an original proprietor, of course that's God. He's the original proprietor and an old settler. Isn't that funny? It's a funny way to think of God, but it is. Who is reported to have dug Walden Pond and fringed it with pine woods. It's like God is all-powerful. God is amazing. Who tells me stories of old time and of new eternity. So God is actually talking to Thoreau. Now, is this like Moses? God's talking to Moses? Is Thoreau, so... Is he having some kind of drugs while he's there? Or is he just so, egocentric that he thinks God is actually talking to him? Is that a crazy thing? Or can God talk to each of us whenever he wants? When we are living a life that's more in line with ourselves, does that help us to be one with God more? Now, this is getting kind of like religio-spiritual, but, it's not really me. I think it's the text. I think the text is going here. I think it's obvious that Thoreau is putting this into a philosophical, theological discussion that includes one's whole life. And I have more proof of that. We're actually going to get to that point in the text, hopefully today, where he actually talks about that. Thoreau's about living life in its full aspect, from economy to theology and philosophy and nature and everything in between. Just as a reference here, Gough and Whaley are two individuals that in England during the, I think it was the English Civil War with Thomas Cromwell, they were descendants and the English government wanted them and they ran off and hid and they could never be found. And so a most wise and humorous friend, whom I love much, who keeps himself more secret than ever did Gough or Whaley. So, God is someone that is in the secret. He's hidden. God is he's a tricky guy, in a sense. And, if you want to really find God, you've got to put up your money. You got to put in some chips on the table, put something on stake, before God might not come around. And you've got to really look for him. You've got to really, invest in that. And that goes back to, if we were to go back to Thoreau, the better part of man is soon plowed into the soil for compost. Men labor under a mistake.